in the world. We have the great zchut and merit of being able to pray here every morning, ever since COVID. And in this very room, the Holy Alshech, who was the Av Bet Din of Tzfat, he was inaugurated as a rabbi by Yosef Karo. His student was Chaim Vital, who was the student of the Ari. And the Ari himself said of the Alshech that his explanation of the Torah is one of the 70 approved explanations of the Torah. And we have the privilege of learning that every morning at 9:30 for an hour, one solid hour of peace and quiet and learning the detailed parasha. We created the Alshech Academy some 3 years ago as a way of introducing the highest quality English-speaking Torah to the world. And Baruch Hashem, from this small idea, we've now created over 1,000 shiurim, free, online, for anybody around the world. We have over 1,000 to nearly 1,500 subscribers. And every week we bring out new material, whether it's on the Ashlag or the Likutei Maharan, or from our own correspondence, or our beloved Yossi Stepansky on the history of Tzfat. But every so often we get a really powerful speaker, and we are really privileged tonight to invite Efrain Palvanov over to be our guest speaker. He's going to be speaking about the 4 Holy Spirit cities of Tzfat, of Israel rather, of which Tzfat is one of them. I'm really, really looking forward to hearing this beautiful talk. Efrain has a real gift he's a master weaver. He takes data, boring data, and makes it alive and relevant and brings it with spiritual relevance to us today, so that when we look at history, we're not looking at history, we're looking at a continuum that's actually involving us right here and now. And that's what makes it so exciting. Efrain, please.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very warm introduction. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. We had a long journey with Zach and David since last night, actually, since I landed. It's been on, driving all around, and many kivrei tzadikim. And we went to Caesarea, and we went to Tveria, and we went to Meron, and now we just arrived here like half an hour ago. So it was a whirlwind day, and I haven't slept in a very long time. So, but Baruch Hashem, it's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here, and thank you all for coming. And since we are in the holy city of Tzfat, I thought it would be appropriate to speak about Tzfat and the whole notion of holy cities and what this actually even means. So what is this idea of 4 holy cities? And on a deeper, not just, we're going to cover some of the history and geography as well, but on a deeper level, what is the mystical, Kabbalistic, spiritual significance of these cities? And it's going to be a long journey. So I know we're in Tzfat, so I assume everybody is a Kabbalist here already. And we don't need introductions. You guys all know about Sfirot and Partzufim and all. I don't have to explain any of that, right? We just go right into it. So, but we'll start with a little introduction, a historical introduction first, and then we'll get into the good stuff. And we have 4. So we have 4 holy cities. There's this idea. It's a pretty new idea. It's not something that goes back to to Chazal or anything. That there's this notion of 4 holy cities. It's something that you only see in our texts, like in the last few hundred years. And what are the 4 holy cities? Don't be shy. You can speak. Good. So Tzfat and Tveria and Hebron and Yerushalayim. Now, of course, the term 4 holy cities is a little bit misleading because, well, what about all the other holy cities, right? Every city in Israel is holy. The land is holy. It's Eretz HaKodesh. Every town is holy. Every yeshuv, every settlement, every place where Jews live here in this holy land is holy. So it's a bit of a misnomer to say that these are the holy cities. So that actually came out of more of a political arrangement that arose in the 1700s of these 4 cities being major Jewish population centers in the 1700s that worked together to collect funds for Israel. They would send emissaries outside of Israel to collect funds for what's sometimes called the old yeshuv, right? The Jews that have always lived here for centuries. And so it really came out of that, of raising funds for these 4 major Jewish population centers. But we know that nothing happens in Judaism stam. The fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that these 4 holy cities, or these 4 cities, have major Jewish populations and have always had Jewish populations, that obviously means something. Why wasn't it some other cities? Why were these the major towns? Why Tzfat? Why not somewhere else? So that means that this is what God wanted. Everything happens under divine supervision. So that's what we want to really uncover. What is the deeper reason that these were these special 4 cities? That's what we're going. So we're going to talk about them. We're going to start with Tzfat, because we're here. So we're going to go with Tzfat first. And Tzfat, again, is not explicitly mentioned in Tanakh. Right? It's not the name of the city in the Tanakh itself. It's not explicitly mentioned there. But it's within what, we believe that it's within what would have been the tribe of Naphtali's territory. And there's a beautiful gematria there for those. Everybody likes gematria? Yeah. Any skeptics? No? Everybody. So we know, the truth is that you can't be a skeptic of gematria because today we understand. 100 years ago you could be. But today, to be a skeptic of gematria is to reject everything we know about science and math, because we now live in a world where, scientifically speaking, we know for a fact that we live in a mathematical cosmos. Everything is math in the universe. Everything is numbers. Everything is formulas. We can formulaically figure out whether it's wind patterns or ocean waves or the motions of all the stars and planets and galaxies across the cosmos precisely. Everything is math. God created a very mathematical universe, and that's what our sages have said all along. Everything is letters and numbers, right? God made the world through 32 paths, lamed bet netivot chokhmah. It's all ultimately letters and numbers. We live in a digital universe. Scientists have only figured this out now. In recent decades, more and more are talking about this idea of being in a digital universe. But we've been saying this for millennia. That's how the Torah begins, right? Bereshit, what does the Torah say right in the first day? That God spoke the universe from day one. God spoke the universe into existence. Speech, it's letters, it's numbers. We've been saying all along that we live in a digital universe. So gematria is just another expression of that, of mathematical relations, of seeing the formulas and numbers and the equivalences in the Torah, because the whole cosmos is mathematical. So with Tzfat being in the land of Naphtali, the gematria of Tzfat, Tzadi Pei Taf, is 570. And the gematria of Naphtali, you do the math, Nun Pei Taf Lamed Yud, is also 570. Right? So Naphtali and Tzfat, it's like this is like the capital of Naphtali. All along, although it's not mentioned as such, explicitly in Tanakh, but all along, mathematically, you can see that Tzfat has always been, the center of the tribe of Naphtali. So, and the gematria, the numbers again prove it. It's all formulas. The name Tzfat is also very interesting. What does this name mean? Right? So that's one idea. So some would say litzpot or litzafot, something to do with vision. Right? Any other ideas for the etymology of Tzfat?
Is it also an edge?
Could be that. Yeah. That's good too. Beautiful. Right. So that's really good. So, a few possibilities. Officially, the scholarly answer, which I think is actually also deeply mystical, is that it comes from an old Persian word, which is safet. And I don't know if there's any Bukharians here. Any Bukharians here? No. I'm the only one? Okay. I'm Bukharian. So in Bukharian as well, which is very similar to Old Farsi and Tajik. So Safet is also a Bukharian word. Safet means white and bright, light. Right? That's what Safet means in Old Persian. And so that's appropriate, again, for this being a place of light, of being a place of Torah secrets, of revealing Torah secrets. Again, Gematria, famous Gematria, you've probably heard this, that the Gematria of Or, of light, Aleph Vav Reish, is 207, which is the same as Raz. Raz meaning secrets. This is the place of revealing secrets. Raz is 207, and light, Or, is 207. Because the truth is, from the creation perspective, we are all beings of light. The first thing that God said, God created, Vayehi Or, God created light. Everything comes from the initial primordial light. And again, amazingly, scientists discovered this as well. In the 1960s, scientists realized that really the whole cosmos is just radiation. So it's light, it's condensed light, essentially, right? The whole cosmos is still radiating. You can detect it. The cosmic microwave background radiation. The universe is still radiating from that initial burst, from that initial Vayehi Or. God spoke. It doesn't stop. It's still radiating till now. You can even pick it up a little bit sometimes on the radio when you hear some of the static. If you're not tuned to something, some of that static is actually picking up cosmic microwave background radiation. And if you can see, our vision, God made our visual spectrum very small. We see a very narrow band of the electromagnetic spectrum. Nothing, just a few hundred nanometers. But if you could see more, you can do like a microwave map. Famous picture, a microwave map of the universe. The whole universe is glowing. Right? And it says that in the Tanakh, that people don't see they don't see the light, bahirhu bashchakim, that there's this great, the whole cosmos, bahirhu bashchakim, is glowing, but we humans don't see it. We can't see that light. Our eyes don't perceive because we see such a narrow band. But the whole idea of light, everything in the cosmos is just condensed light. So there's this idea of revealing secrets. What are you really doing? You're revealing light. You're seeing the light connection. So Tzfat being Safed, being a place of light, of whiteness, of revealing white light. And remember, white light is when all the wavelengths come together. If you put all the colors together, that's what white has, all the bands. Right? Yeah. You remember the rainbow, the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Red is a very long wavelength. Blue is a very narrow wavelength. And you put them all together, though, you get white light. Right? That's Tzfat. It's the white light that contains everything within. And if you put a prism, then it splits and you see all the different colors. Everything in the universe is really that analogy. It's all just Hashem's light. Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. But with our prism eyes, God put prisms in our eyes that make things look distinct, that bend the light so that we see things as different. That's red, that's blue, that's orange. But really, it's all one. But we have these prisms that make us see distinction, but really we're all interconnected. So that's really the idea of Tzfat, of being a place of light. And the Gemara in the Talmud Yerushalmi says where Tzfat is actually mentioned, one of the earliest places, that Tzfat was, because it's so high up on the mountain, that this was a signal place where people would light signal fires to tell everybody around about the sighting of the new moon and the start of Rosh Chodesh. So they would light signal fires from Tzfat. And that connects to the etymology of also seeing it, a place to see. Like Haratzofim, like an overlooking, a place to see, to look at. Right? Same root that Tzadi Pei, that same root is there as well. Now, throughout history, we don't really hear much about Tzfat until the 1500s. After the Spanish expulsion, 1492, the Sephardim had nowhere to go. They were looking, where do we go from now? I mentioned recently in a shiur from Toronto, if you guys heard on YouTube, but I mentioned recently that Christopher Columbus was also of Jewish lineage. He went on behalf of Christian Spain, but really he was a Jew. And it's not a coincidence that Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492, literally the same week as the Spanish expulsion. And his two main financiers of his voyage were Jews, because they were looking for a place for the Jews to, where would the Jews go, right? The Spanish decreed in January, you have until August, till Tisha B'Av, and then you got to go. So right away, Jews said, okay, we got to find a place to go. So they financed Columbus's voyage, who he himself came from Jewish stock. And more than half his crew, we know who they were, more than half his crew was Jewish. So they were looking, America was really discovered by Europeans. as a place for Sephardim to go. Originally, that was Christopher Columbus's deeper purpose. And he used Rav Avram Zakuto's astronomical tables to do it. He couldn't have done it without the amazing work of another rabbi, mystic, Kabbalist, Rav Avram Zakuto. Now, most of the Jews went east, and they went to the Ottoman Empire. And one of those great sage was Rav Yosef Saragosi. Heard of him before? So his kever is not far from here in Ein Zeitin. And Rav Yosef Saragosi came here, and he found here basically not much, 300 Jews, but very impoverished, no proper functioning shul, no yeshiva, no Jewish learning. So he said, okay, let's revive this town. Let's revive this holy place. He felt something here. He felt that kernel of light over here. He said, let's reveal that light. So he established a yeshiva, and very quickly it became a major center of learning and attracted scholars from all over the place. And Tzfat, within a century, was transformed into, what's sometimes called the capital of Jewish mysticism. Right? And so much really happened here. Rav Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch here. So even halachically it was important, not just Kabbalistically. And the Arizal was here, and the Ramak, and Rav Chaim Vital, and so many others, and Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, who gave us Lecha Dodi. All of that happened here very quickly. So it's really Rav Yosef Saragosi who transformed this town and was admired not just by the Jews here, but even by the local Muslims and Arabs. And his salary was actually paid for. At one point he said he's going to leave because he couldn't make a living here. And the local Muslim ruler said, no, I'll pay your salary. You stay here. We need you here. So they made an arrangement where the local Muslim mayor, leader, whoever it was paying 2/3 of Rav Yosef Saragosi's salary for him to stay here. So he was seen as a miracle worker and a saint by everybody, Jewish and non-Jewish alike. And his nickname was actually Hatzadik Alavan, the white saint, which again goes back very appropriate because that's what Tzfat means. Tzfat means white, means bright light, white light. So it's all connected. He helped to make this place, to bring it out, all of its inner potential. So that's Tzfat, and again there's that connection to litzpot, which is like to gaze forward and to yearn. And if you remember, the Gemara says that after a person, after 120 years, goes up to heaven and he's judged, he's asked 6 questions. You remember this? What are the 6 questions? Who knows? May know what are some business, right? Famous, yeah. Yeah. Good, yeah, the first one. So everybody remembers the first one. So, בשעה שמכניסים אדם לדין, אומרים לו, נסעת ונתת באמונה, right? The first one is, did you deal with people faithfully? Your business dealings, your transactions, were all your transactions honest and faithful? That's number 1. And kivat eitim laTorah. Number 2 is, did you make regular study sessions for Torah? Did you affix times to learn Torah? Also very important, to learn God's word. And the third one is pirya v'rivya. Did you try to engage in reproduction to fulfill what many say is the first mitzvah in the Torah, which is reproduction, and to bring children into the world and also to raise them properly. Not enough just to bring them. You also have to make sure that they are raised in proper, godly, holy tzaddikim. And then tzipita liYeshua. And it's an interesting word that's used, tzipita liYeshua. Did you await the salvation? Did you yearn for the salvation? It's not just did you wait passively. Tzipita is like, did you really try to bring it about? Not just passively, but actively. Right? And I think there's a connection to tzipita to tzfat. It's really the same letters, right? And based on that, I think, partly based on that, there is an old tradition, you probably all know this, that Mashiach will first come through Tzfat, right? He'll make an appearance here first, and then goes elsewhere. But Tzfat is the first stopping point of Mashiach. So I think it's related to this idea of Tzipita leYeshua. There's a secret allusion there to Tzfat. You're waiting for Yeshua. You're working towards Yeshua. It's going to begin in Tzfat. Bezrat Hashem. And then the last... which one? So the last 2 is pilpalta bechokhmah, which is a little deeper than just learning Torah. It's actually engaging in discussion and trying to attain true divine wisdom, chokhmah. And the last one is hevanta davar mitoch davar. Did you understand one thing from another? And that needs its own discussion as well, of the difference between chokhmah and bina. Just briefly, we live in a world today that has a lot of chokhmah, Baruch Hashem, right? We live in a world where information has become very cheap. Back in the day, Chokhmah was very prized because it was very hard to get. Before the printing press, especially, like, you couldn't really get books. You couldn't just go to a bookstore and get it. It was very hard to go. A Beit Midrash was something special. And the average Jew didn't have access to Sfarim. Today, you have on your phone, you have everything. You have 20,000 Sfarim on your phone. You can look up anything. You can search any word. It's incredible. So the Chokhmah is so available today. It's really amazing, right? This is another sign that we're in the Ikvot HaMashiach already, that it's all available at our fingertips. What's missing today, though, or that we don't have enough of today, is Binah. Binah is already a little deeper, right? Binah is binyan, it's building, it's growing, it's lavin bein zelazeh, it's knowing the difference, it's being able to connect, to differentiate, to distinguish. It's a little one step further. So sometimes we forget that chokhmah is not enough. It's not enough to hard drive and memorize a lot of information. Right? We need to actually be able to understand it and make connections and bring things together. That's a little deeper. So God's going to ask you both. It's not enough to just have read a lot of books. Did you actually understand it? Did you connect it? Did you make sense of it? Did you apply it in your life? That's Binah. That's for another time. We're going to stick to our four holy cities. So that was all Tzfat. Next, not far from here, is Tveria. Right? Tveria, somewhat ironically, is named after a Roman emperor. Right? It's named after the Caesar Tiberius, which is really interesting that we have like this holy city, but named after a Roman emperor. So how did that happen? It's actually because it's named after a Roman emperor that it became such an important city in Judaism. Why? Because the whole town was built for the glory of Tiberius, and it was associated with Rome. But because of that, it was spared the destruction by the Romans during the Great Revolt, when the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and then again in the Bar Kokhba revolt, about 65 years later. The Romans didn't destroy Tveria because that would be sacrilegious to them, to destroy their own emperor's city. So Tveria was spared both times. And the people that lived here were pretty much okay, and they made it. And that's what preserved Judaism here, because it was named after Tveria. So it was all, again, God orchestrated in such a way, let's give him this little ego boost. He'll name it after himself, fine. But then that's going to actually save it from destruction in the wars that come. And then the rabbis saw an opportunity there. They said, well, where are we going to go? Once the temple was destroyed, and then after the devastation of Bar Kokhba, they went to Tveria, and they were able to reestablish the Sanhedrin in Tveria. And much of the Mishnah was composed there, and much of the Talmud Yerushalmi was composed there. So again, God orchestrated in a beautiful way that Tveria was turned into a refuge following these Roman wars. But Tveria actually does have a biblical origin in Tanakh, and it is mentioned in Tanakh. Anybody know the original name of Tveria? It actually is in Tanakh. Yeah, you should know. Apparently you should know this. So, in Tanakh, it's called Rakat, right? There we go. We got confirmation from the archaeologists. So, Rakat was the biblical city that Tiberius built on top of Rakat.
Not within the city. Rakat is a little outside.
Just off the city, yeah. In the same space. There we go. You can correct me whenever I'm a little bit wrong. So, that's Rakat, the biblical town that became Tveria. And then eventually it became a center for Chazal, really, to reestablish themselves after the destructions at the hands of the Romans. And again, it was post 1492, when Sephardic Jews were actually coming here in large numbers, where Tveria again becomes a very important city. So much so that a very important Jewish Sephardi man named Don Joseph Nasi, and he had an aunt, Donna Gracia, if you know her, they had an important banking, they were a banking family, they had many important businesses. They were conversos, they were forced to convert to Christianity in Spain to save their life. Then they escaped, they were in the Netherlands for a while. Eventually they found refuge Don Joseph Nasi found refuge in Istanbul, in the Ottoman Empire, became a very influential person there, and kind of even part of the nobility, was given various noble titles. And he managed to convince the Ottoman government to give the Jews a semi-autonomous state. Some people call him a proto-Zionist because of that, because he actually worked politically to establish a semi-autonomous Jewish state in the Holy Land. And the plan was that its capital would be Tiberias. And he was actually officially conferred the title Lord of Tiberias by the Ottomans. He was given he had another title. He was the Duke of Naxos, and they gave him a charter to establish a semi-autonomous Jewish state within the Ottoman Empire with its capital in Tveria. He was given the title Lord of Tiberias. And he made various deals to even bring Jews here. He tried to get Jews from Venice to move here and settle here. They planted mulberry orchards to try to bring silkworms and establish a silk industry in Tveria. But various things happened that it didn't go through. Nonetheless, Jews lived here, but it was a while until it was until the 1700s that the community really strengthened itself and was able to make a living here. But again, Tveria, post-1492, thanks to the influx of Sephardi Jews, it started to flourish once more. Then we have Hebron. Hebron is the only one that's explicitly mentioned in the Chumash. Hebron is straight in the Torah. I'm not going to tell the stories because you already know them all. We know Me'arat HaMachpelah is there, the Cave of the Patriarchs. We know that King David's capital was Hebron. Right? For the first 7 years of King David's reign, he was in Hebron. And then for the last 33 years, he was in Yerushalayim. But it all began in Hebron. So Hebron has a very important Torah foundation straight out of the Chumash. It was also one of the 6 cities of refuge. So that's Hebron. And interestingly enough, it had another name. What's another name of Hebron? Anybody know? Kiryat Arba. Right? So it's also called Kiryat Arba. And who is Arba? Who are these Kiryat Arba? It seems to be like the place of 4 or the place of Arba. Who is this person? So the Torah tells us in Bamidbar, Ve'alu b'negev ve'avo ad Chevron. In Hebron, who was there? V'sham Achiman Sheshai v'Talmai Yelidei ha'anak. And here were these 3 giants that they saw, that the Meraglim, that the spies saw. Achiman Sheshai v'Talmai. And they were the sons of the Anak. So there's apparently these 4 giants here. This Anak and his 3 sons that lived here. And that's Hebron. And Yoshua adds to that, and he says that Hebron was also Kiryat Arba because there was Ha'adam Hagadol Ba'anakim. Arba was apparently his name, that there was this great giant whose name was Arba, and he had 3 children. And later on, it was Kalev ben Yefuneh who was able to subdue this place, and he was given Hebron as an extra gift, an extra city as part of the inheritance in the tribe of Yehudah. And if you remember, he actually went to Hebron at the beginning of the journey of the Meraglim, that he actually came to the Me'arat HaMachpelah, to the Cave of the Patriarchs, to get some inspiration and to have some merit from the forefathers to help him on his mission so that he shouldn't fail. It's very deeply connected to Yehudah and to Kalev. So that's Hebron. And finally, we have Yerushalayim, which is not explicitly mentioned in the Chumash, but of course is mentioned hundreds of times in the Tanakh, in the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim. In the Chumash, it appears in another name, in a very similar name. It makes its first appearance in the 14th chapter in the Reshit, in this war, after the war that Abraham has against these 4 Mesopotamian kings. And after he wins the war, he meets Melchizedek, this king of Shalem. And Melchizedek, we say, as per our tradition, that Melchizedek is Shem, the son of Noach, and he was Melchizedek. He was the first priest. He's just called a Kohen over there. He was the first priest of God and the king of Shalem. And he named the place Shalem as a wholesome place, a place of peace. And it's really a stargate to the heavens. It's a portal to the heavens, a wholesome place. It's Eben Hashtiyah is there, the foundation stone. Where did the universe begin from? Right? Both Kabbalah and modern science say the same thing, that the universe began from a tiny point, which scientists call a singularity. Right? And in Kabbalistic texts, the Zohar calls it Nikuda Chada Di Zohar, at this tiny point of light from which the whole cosmos emerged. And so what was that point of light? If it could be anywhere, it would be in Yerushalayim. It's like Jerusalem's the center of the universe. That's our belief. So Shem was there first, and he established it as this holy place. He was Melchizedek. He called it Shalem. And then later, when Abraham was told, God commanded Abraham to bring Yitzhak to Har Moriah and to make an olah, to offer him up. And he called that place, Abraham called it Yireh. And the Midrash famously says that, well, then God kind of had a problem, because Shem called it Shalem, And Abraham called it Yireh. So God says, well, who am I going to call it after? Are we going to call it Shalem or are we going to call it Yireh? So God says, okay, let's bring it together so that we don't upset either tzaddik. Bring it together, make it Yerushalayim, everybody's happy. Then it's named by both Shem and Abraham, and we have Yerushalayim. Right? So that's, and of course there's much deeper significance to exactly why that is the way it is. But that's where the origin of Yerushalayim really comes from, and then it's first explicitly named and mentioned in Yoshua, and then in Shoftim, and it was a stronghold by then of the Yevusim, one of the Canaanite tribes, and then King David is able to grab it from the Yevusim and eventually establish Jerusalem as his new capital for a unified, a new, renewed Jewish kingdom, or Israelite kingdom, when all the 12 tribes were together. Unfortunately, for a very short time. Now, jumping ahead, it was in 1640 that Hebron and Tzfat and Yerushalayim had such burgeoning Jewish populations, and they needed support from Chutz La'aretz, that they joined forces and created this acronym called Yachatz. Yachatz was Yerushalayim, Hebron, and Tzfat. And so they then sent emissaries on behalf of all three communities outside of Israel to collect funds to support the Jews that lived here. And Jews outside of Israel who felt like this continues to this day. You feel a little bit guilty, like I should be in Israel, but like why am I living in Galut? I should make an effort to live here. So okay, so at least I'll send my money, my funds, I'll support Israel externally as much as possible. If I can't live there, at least I'll do whatever I can to support the people that live there. And so that actually, in 1640, these three cities were called the three holy cities with the acronym Yachatz. And then, as I mentioned earlier, by 1740, Tveria was also large enough that Tveria joined the mix. And they added that to they didn't really make a new acronym, but they just added Tveria to it. And then they became the four holy cities. Instead of the three holy cities, it became the four holy cities. Now, again, all cities in Israel are holy, but the fact that Hashem brought it about in such a way that these four were the flourishing towns throughout history, of course there's got to be a reason. And once you start meditating on it, what these cities represent, it actually becomes crystal clear. And once you hear it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense now. Right? Like, why these four cities? And how it connects to all these other patterns and numbers in creation. Everything really comes out of these numbers. And we have one of these special numbers is the number 4. Because Hashem's name, again, 4 letters. And you see this parallel in various other things that are 4 in mystical texts. You have the 4 olamot, Asiyah and Yetzirah and Bria and Atzilut. You have the 4 elements. You hear in both ancient, even non-Jewish texts necessarily, but in ancient times it was always believed that there's 4 main elements in the cosmos, right? Fire and water and earth and air. You have 4 major elements. And you also see in Judaism, you kind of have 4 sources of text. You have your Chumash, which is number 1, the 5 books of Moses. Nothing comes close to that, right? That's the holiest, that's the greatest, that's what's in the ark behind me, right? It's the Chumash of Moshe. And it's one of the principles of Jewish faith that nothing comes close to Moshe, right? He's the greatest prophet ever. No other prophecy is even close to the prophecy of Moshe. And the Chumash is first. So you have the Chumash, that's number 1. And then after the Chumash, you also have the rest of Tanakh, also very holy, right? That's the next part. And then you also have, the next set is the Mishnah Gemara, you have Chazal, and then you have Kabalah, the mystical stuff, right? So you have your Chumash with Moshe, then you have all the other prophets in Nach, and then you have Chazal, you have Mishnah, Gemara, Midrash, and then Kabbalah, which was only, also of course goes back to Sinai, but was only the last thing to be revealed explicitly in the last 500 to 1,000 years. See those 4, so you see all these 4. Now if you start thinking about it, you see how these 4 parallel all these things. So look at how, for instance, these 4 holy cities parallel the 4 types of Jewish texts. Right? Chumash, which there's only one of these 4 cities that's explicit in the Chumash. That's Hebron. Hebron is Chumash. Right from the beginning, right from Bereshit, the Torah speaks about Hebron. That corresponds to your Chumash. Then you have Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is the most commonly named place in Nach. The whole Nach is really set all around Yerushalayim. That's the center of Nach. That's where Yerushalayim really emerges as the capital of the Jewish people. And so that Yerushalayim corresponds to the Nach, the rest. And then you have Tveria. What happened in Tveria? Mishnah, Talmud Yerushalmi. That's where Chazal went. Midrash. That's where it was composed. Tveria is Chazan. And then Tzfat. You all know what Tzfat's Kabalah, right? All the Kabbalists came here, and it was Dafka here that it was revealed, right? You see it parallel perfectly to those four. Think about the four elements. Same. Hebron, what is the element of Hebron? The whole story of Hebron is earth. It's the cave. It's Abraham buying the first plot of land, which becomes now a motif for Jewish history, of Jews purchasing the land, including in our generation in the last 100 years, of Jews coming here legally purchasing the land, despite what all the, who say, and all their nonsense and their propaganda. This was legally acquired, purchased, piece by piece, over many decades, just like Abraham did. He bought a piece of land here. It's all about starting with Hebron. So Hebron is land, it's earth. It's the patriarchs were buried there. The whole theme of Hebron is the earth. Tveria is the only one on the water. It's right on the Kinneret. Tveria is water. And of course, Tveria is Rabbi Akiva is buried there. Remember, Tveria is Chazan. And what inspired Rabbi Akiva to become religious, to finally at age 40, to choose? Right. He sees the water dripping on a rock and sees that it makes a hole. It drips for long enough, and soft water can make a hole even in the hard rock, given enough time. And then he realizes, right, that's the beginning of the story, and then he realizes, well, if water can do this to rock, then how much more so Torah can, what can Torah do to me? So, Tveria is all about the water, and Rabbi Akiva is there to this day, right? And Yerushalayim, it's fire, Esh Tamid, the altar, the perpetual flame, it's all about fire, Jerusalem. And Tzfat, up in the air. Right? Tzfat is the highest point, right? It's the highest of these four cities. I looked it up. The highest point you can get to in Tzfat is apparently 937 meters high, right? You have a better number?
900 something.
9 and something. I saw three numbers. I saw it starts at 850, and then it goes to 891, and then I saw 937. So maybe if you're taller, it's a little more. If you're standing at that. So that's Tzfat up in the air. So it's clear. No, there's no missing it. These four cities clearly correspond to the four elements. You see it as well in terms of the four worlds, how each one corresponds to what, right? Asiyah, Olam Asiyah is again Hebron, the first one. Right? It's all practical. It's Torah. It's mitzvot. Asiyah is here. What we were put here, Asher bara Elohim la'asot. God put us here, la'asot, to do, to work, to do things. That's the Hebron, that's Olam Asiyah. And then you have Yetzirah. What is Yetzirah? What is the deeper stuff behind the Torah? The earliest Kabbalistic text that we have is called Sefer Yetzirah. All right, so Yetzirah is, the world of Yetzirah corresponds to Kabbalah, corresponds to Tzfat. This is the place of Yetzirah, of forming light. How does light form into matter? It's Sefet, it's light. This is the place of that. And then you have Tveria, which is, like we said already, is water, is Bria, is the formation of the background, the deeper creation, the world of Bria, the fabric of the universe. And then, of course, Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, is the highest level corresponding to Atzilut, of pure divine fire and light. So you can see how it corresponds to even those. And you can see how it corresponds to the Sfirot and Partzufim as well. You can probably do that on your own. So, or do you want me to do it for you? Let's do it. Okay. So, we're going to take it to the next level. Are we ready to take it to the next level?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That was all an introduction. You probably are like, okay, we heard this all before. Give us something new, right? Okay. Let's go a little deeper. You'll notice in the cosmos that 4 is always linked to 5. We'll see how this all plays out. 4 goes with 5. This is true again in science, and this is true in Torah. Everything that I just said that's 4 is actually 5. Right? You're probably thinking that already. Wait, but what about Hashem's name, it's 4 letters, but there's the 5th part of it, right? The Yud has the crown. So there's the crown on top of the Yud. That's a separate thing. Yeah, there's 4 elements, but what about the 5th element, the ether? There's always talk of a 5th, the hidden spiritual, the 5th element. There's 4 olamot, but then there's also a 5th one, right? What's it called? Adam Kadmon. There's something even more sublime, even above all that. Right? There's always a 5th. There's 5 partzufim. There's 5 books of the Torah, not 4. There's 5 levels to your soul. What are the 5 levels to your soul? You start from the top. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Okay? So Nefesh is the lowest level. Hadamhu, Nefesh. The Torah always says, Nefesh Badamhu. It's associated with the blood. Animals have it too. That's why we drain the blood. So Nefesh is the lowest. That's like your basic life force that's coursing through your body in your blood. Ruach is already more. It's associated with your vital organs. It's wind, it's spirit, it's air, it's breathing. It's associated with your lungs, your heart, your liver. More liver is also like nefesh, but it's more your vital organs. And then you have neshama, which is already intellect. It's the seat of the neshama is in the brain. And then beyond your body, already exuding your being, is 2 even higher levels, the chaya and the yechida. The chaya is sometimes described as an aura, and the yechida, again, the most sublime, the most concealed. That's your divine umbilical cord directly to Hashem. So you have 5. So we have a problem now. We said there's 4 holy cities, no? So what's the solution? There should be 5. We're missing one. What's the 5th one? Azza? Shem? Okay, maybe. Okay, we got some good suggestions. We got good suggestions. Good, yeah, they're getting closer. We're getting closer. So I'll tell you what I think. This isn't something that I saw in a sefer, okay? This is a hypothesis. Take it or leave it. You don't like it, it's nothing. It's just my idea. You like it, you take it, okay? See, even the camera can't handle it. Right? So, maybe it isn't a sefer. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But I think if you hear me out, it'll make sense. Okay. What is the hidden 5th one? The Torah tells us of a hidden 5th holy city. And it's everywhere in Chazal if you just open your eyes. And you've heard this before. There is a hidden 5th city. And it's very special. And it's very concealed. Yeah, it's like the ether. And we first see it with Yaakov's ladder. Yaakov has a vision. It's in Beit El. And what does the Torah say? What was the place called? Vayikra et Shem hamakom hahu Beit El. Yaakov called it Beit El. And this was in Yerushalayim, where God's house would be built. Eventually the temple would be there, Beit El. But Yaakov renamed it, right? Or Yaakov called it Beit El, but originally, Ve'ulam Luz Shem ha'ir l'rishona. But originally that place was called Luz. So in the same place, in Yerushalayim, there's something hidden there, and it's called Luz. What do we know about Luz? The Luz bone, which we're going to get to. What do we know about the city of Luz? So the Midrash says...
Here in Tzfat.
Really? Interesting.
Not by
Interesting.
the Jews,
Yeah.
but by the non-Jews.
Okay, very
and
interesting.
also by some Jews. Beit El, Tzfat.
Let's see what the Zohar says. So, Bereshit Rabbah, the Ulam Luz comments on these words. What is this? First of all, he Luz shetzov'in ba et Tchelet. This is the place of Tchelet. Either where Tchelet comes from or where somehow connected to Tchelet. Okay. Which is already very significant. Tchelet, the blue dye. The blue dye in your tzitzit, Tchelet. He luz she'ala Sancheriv velo bilbala. It's the same place that Sancheriv, if you remember, who exiled the tribes and tried to conquer Jerusalem as well and couldn't. He wanted Luz too, apparently, and we'll see why in a moment. But he was not able to take it. He was not able to enter. Nebuchadnezzar, also, the Babylonian Nebuchadnezzar, also wanted to, velo ichriva. He could not destroy it. He Luz shelo sholet ba malach hamavet me'olam. This place is the immortal city. This is the one place where the malach hamavet cannot enter. And the people there don't die. So now we can understand why Sancheriv wanted to go there. The elixir of life is in Luz. It's the immortal city. So, Askenim Sheba, the elders that live there, what happens? They don't die. Ma'osin lahem, kevan shem skenim harbe, when they're too old, motzin otam chutz lachoma ve'em metim. When you take them out of the city, then they die. But inside the city, there's no malach hamavet. That's Luz. And later, there's more description. I'm going to skip a little bit. Rabbi Elazar b'shem Rabbi Pinchas bar Hama amar, Luz haya omed al pitcha shel me'ara. There was a Luz tree. Now, Luz is some kind of nut. Could be an almond. Some say almond, some say hazelnut. One or the other. Some kind of nut. And there was this nut tree that was in front of a cave. And if you had to go through this, through this special Luz tree, you would get into this tunnel, into this cave, and then you could somehow enter the city. Maybe if I can throw in something Kabbalistic, maybe another type of nut is that it's a pine nut. And I say that specifically because of the connection to the pineal gland. And if you know a little bit about the pineal gland, you know about the pineal gland? There's a gland in your brain, which, the pineal, deeper in your brain. And its main job is it governs your circadian rhythm, your timekeeping. It releases melatonin. This is where melatonin is produced that puts you to sleep. Now, it's also thought to produce a little bit of what's called DMT, which is a molecule similar to melatonin. And if you've heard of DMT, some people abuse it as a hallucinogenic drug. But it's found in nature, it's found in plants. It's found in plants that are mentioned in the Torah, like the Atzei Shittim, the acacia wood that was used for the Mishkan. And people take it as a drug because it makes them have these dreamlike hallucinations. But it's believed that your brain, your pineal, actually does produce a little bit of it, and it plays a role in your dreams. And so the pineal gland was actually always seen as the third eye. And the truth is, the Zohar speaks about it, if you understand it properly. There's this idea of an inner eye, and it's connected to the tefillin. Tefillin being connected to the inner third eye. What's amazing about the pineal gland is that it actually has photoreceptors like your eyes do. And in other animals, like in birds, the pineal gland is really up top, under their skull. And so they can actually picks up light, and it helps them navigate when they migrate. So in other animals, it actually is used as a photoreceptor, mamash like a third eye. And we have it too. And it even has photoreceptor cells, but for us it's very deep in our brain. But it is very much like an inner third eye. So some people link the Luz as this mystical city that you have to go through a special tunnel to the pineal gland, to the pine nut. That's something I think we need to do a few more hours to get to that. Maybe, it's a possibility. So maybe it's like a pine nut, but that's Luz. So, and the Midrash says that it's a hidden place. You have to go through a special nut to get there, through a special nut tree to get there. And it's a place of immortality. Amazingly. Now, where is Luz? The Zohar says, Vayomer Yaakov el Yosef el Shaddai nira elai beluz. Specifically, when Yaakov speaks to Yosef, he says, God appeared to me in Luz. He calls it Luz, which is interesting because he was the one that called it Bet El. But he doesn't refer to it as Bet El here, but he says Luz. And again, there's a lot of deep meaning of why he used that word there. Meditate on that for homework. Why did he say, why not Bet El? Wouldn't it have made more sense to say Bet El? It's amazing what you'll find here if you meditate on it a little bit. And Rabbi Abba Amar, what is Luz? Da Yerushalayim Ilah. Luz is the supernal Jerusalem. That's why it's in Yerushalayim. It's Bet El. It's the secret portal from Yerushalayim to a higher realm. That's Luz. It's your hidden fifth city. You need a special portal to get there. And you see how all these things that we just listed about these cities start to make sense. It's the place of Tchelet. Okay, why did the Midrash tell us this? The Zohar is just making explicit what the Midrash was saying implicitly. Because why Tchelet? What is so special about the Tchelet? We say it's blue, like the throne of God, right? It's like the sea, which reflects the sky, which is like the throne of God. God's throne is blue, so to speak. Right? The Tchelet is like God's throne in the Yerushalayim, in the heavenly Jerusalem, in the heavens above. Right? You can see the connection to Tchelet. And by the way, based on this, you can reason that there's something very powerful about Tchelet as having protective qualities connected to longevity, because Luz is the place where the Malach HaMavet has no influence, has no authority. So you think about what that means. The Malach HaMavet is repelled by Tchelet, something really powerful in this special dye. And it comes from, the Tchelet comes from Chilazon. Look at the letters, right? Luz, Chilazon. Right? It's the same, Chai, Luz, Chilazon. Right? Same thing. The same root. At the core is the same letters. Basically, this is a pitch for wearing tchelet. Everybody should wear tchelet. If you're not already wearing tchelet, wear.
That's why we're surrounded by tchelet and stuff.
There you go. There you go. Exactly. And if you needed another reason for why the graves of tzaddikim are often painted blue, here's another reason, right? The soul is still alive. The soul never dies. This idea of immortality, of longevity. We're still here. They're still here. Thousands of years later, there's that tchelet connection to the throne of God, to all these. It's an amazing thing. Anyway, people should wear tchelet. I think it's catching on. More and more people are wearing it, and it makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you wear it? I think that's the question. You have nothing to lose. People will argue, is it the right one? Is it not the right? Whatever. It is scientifically proven that basically it is the right one. They found in Masada garments from 2,000 years ago that had tchelet, and chemically it's the exact same chemical blue as the murex snail where you get the tchelet from. My specialty is in biochemistry. I teach organic chemistry. I can tell, I've looked at the chemical diagrams. Okay, so it's legit. So this is it. So I don't know if you can get better proof than that you can look at it on a molecular level. This is the one. Right? So, and in any case, you have nothing to lose by wearing it, because putting it doesn't invalidate the tzitzit. So it's like, what do you have to lose? You should wear it. And it looks nicer. So. And you potentially have this incredible thing, this incredible connection to longevity and Hashem and the fifth city and seeing beyond. You know, Tchelet also, we need a separate shiur on just Tchelet, and the idea of tzitzit, which also has the same root of lehatzitz, of being able to gaze into the spiritual world. If you remember, Arba'a shenichnesu bepardes, the four rabbis, the four sages who went up to heaven, and the language that's used there is hetzitz. They looked into the heavens, right? There's a connection of tzitzit to seeing. And that's what it says in the Shema. You will see it. You will have the tzitzit. It'll have a kanaf ptil tchelet. You will see it. And then you will remember Hashem. So it's all about vision. And not necessarily physical vision, but even spiritual vision. Think about the pineal gland. Think about your inner third eye. It's all connected. And the Kabbalists say, why does the tzitzit hang by your legs? What are the legs Kabbalistically? The legs are Netzach and Hod. And Netzach and Hod are the roots of prophecy. These are the sfirot of prophecy, where we draw prophecy from. So actually tzitzit is deeply intertwined with spiritual vision. So wearing tzitzit with tchelet, the proper way, is a method, is a way to glimpse into the heavens. That's the beauty of this blue dye. So that was my pitch to wear tchelet, and it's connected to Luz and the fifth dimension, the fifth city. That's Luz. Now, yeah.
I like what you say so much, because it's not only a pitch, but it also makes sense. But somehow it's been since the beginning, when it first came out 2 years ago, the idea was like a conservative value of, no, we hold on to what we have. Instead of going to something else. And there's another pitch in order to stop this kind of progress. Are we getting to the point right now where we're more spiritual now than we used to be?
We're in Ikvat HaMashiach. So now we're transitioning. I think everybody sees that. I don't think anybody denies. I don't think so. I don't think anybody in the Jewish world will deny that we're in times of Geula. I mean, it would be really strange to deny that, right? I say this many, many times. The Gemara tells you what is the sign of Geula. Ein ketz megule mizeh. There's no greater sign of the redemption. The Gemara tells you, how do you know you're in Ikvot HaMashiach? It's very simple. How do you know? Anybody remember this Gemara? Ein ketz megule mizeh. I've said it so many times. You've heard me say it a lot of times. What is the number one sign of the redemption? This is the sign. Fruits. If you see the land of Israel producing an abundance of fruits and produce, you know you're in Geula. The Gemara says that. Ein ketz megule mizeh. There's no greater sign of the redemption. You want to know if you're in Ikvot HaMashiach? Is the land of Israel producing an abundance of produce? Because that has not happened, I mean, for sure in the last 2,000 years, but possibly never has Israel actually had so much that it's exporting to the world. Right? Where I live in Toronto, I can go 5 minutes away to a Costco, and there is Israeli pomegranates, and there's Israeli grapefruits, and there's whatever you can. We get all that stuff, right? We can get Israeli figs and Israeli dates and whatever. That's a fulfillment of prophecy. If you're outside of Israel and you're buying Israeli produce, or Israeli wheat, the Gemara even talks about wheat also, of Israeli wheat products, of cakes. If Israel's producing an abundance of wheat and cake, you can go to like any country in the world, most countries of the world, and get like an elite Israeli wheat cake, right? This is a fulfillment of prophecy. Elite did not pay me to say that. This is not a sponsor. You can get anywhere in the world. You can get Israeli wheat products and fruits and vegetables. That's never happened in history that Israel is exporting fruits around the world, right? Never. And the Gemara says, you want to know when Mashiach is near, when is Ikvot HaMashiach, when you're in the times of Geula? This is it. If you can get Israeli produce at your local supermarket, you're good. There's no other. You don't need any other proof. Okay? So I don't think anybody in their right mind could deny that we're in the times of Geula, we're in the times of Ikvot HaMashiach. And so what that requires, though, is a new mindset. So I'm not the first person to speak about this. Many have. That we have to get out of a galut mindset and move into a Geula mindset. And it's very hard to do when you've been stuck in a galut mindset for 2,000 years. And plus your religion is based on this idea of Mesorah and like, hey, you can't change things. So that creates a conflict that's like irreconcilable. How can I not change, but then you want me to change? Like you want me to go from galut to Geula. That's a massive change. But then you're saying, but we can't change because we're so afraid to like change one little thing. So yeah, that's a problem, right? That conflict needs to be resolved very soon. And I think the only way to resolve it is in the individual. Like each individual has to make that switch from galut mindset to Geula mindset. Right? The fact that we even have tchelet today is just another sign that we're in Geula times. Right? The fact that you can actually get this blue dye is incredible. Isn't that another sign that we're in the times of? And there's so many others. So yeah, it definitely needs a deeper discussion. But the point is, the short message is, let's switch on the Geula mindset. That's the last thing we need to bring about what we want. And it is a mass consciousness thing, because we manifest our reality. That's well known. Not even mystically, but even scientifically. Right? We've heard this before, the whole idea of the observer effect, and the idea of what quantum physics has discovered about wave-particle duality, and how mamash, our mind, our consciousness, us as the observer, affects the world around us. Right? Wolfgang Pauli, who's one of these great scientists, said this. He says, what quantum physics has done is it's turned man into a little lord of creation. That's his words. That because quantum physics proves that we are a little creator. We mamash manifest our reality. So imagine if we had a mass consciousness that switched on Geula mass consciousness. What would we manifest? It's incredible. If you're thinking galut, you're manifesting galut. If you're thinking Geula, you're manifesting Geula. But it has to be genuine thinking Geula. Because I do need to say that some people think that they're in a Geula mindset, but they're not. They're in 100% in the galut mindset, by the way they dress, and by the way they speak, and by the way, and they'll say, yeah, we're in a geula mindset, right? And I don't want to get into the details right now. Maybe we'll talk about it after. But people say they're in a geula mindset and they're ready, but you're not there, right? Like, you have to express geula in every fiber of your being. Just saying it means nothing. What are you actually doing to be in that mind, in that state of mind and state of soul?
So we have here in Tzfat, I find more than any place else in Israel. I go back and forth across Israel all the time. But what is in Tzfat, as you say, this mindset. People are like, they're moving into it. As soon as you start talking about things, people brighten up.
Right.
And they go towards, let me see depth and let me find it in myself. You go all over other places around Israel, and it's still in that strange.
I don't want to shatter your conception of Tzfat. Tzfat's beautiful, but I think here too we just saw some. I'm not going to get into this now, but here too we see people, and Zach and David were there with me. People who again say they're in Geula, but they're 100% in Galut. We just had an experience with a person. I'm not going to get into the details, but somebody who thinks they're in Geula, they're 100% in Galut, 100% mentally in Galut. So maybe we'll talk about this after. It's not enough to just say it. It's a certain switch that you have to have in your brain. It's a certain mindset that is not, I think, not taught enough often today. Right? Yeah. Let me finish this, and then we can come back to that. If we get this out of the way, and then we can stay late into the night, and we can discuss these things. So let's just finish with luz, the fifth. The luz is also a bone. Chazal says that this is the bone of resurrection. Tchiyat metim will happen from a luz bone, apparently. This etzem luz. And what is this bone? Quite mysterious. So some people say it's here, right? Like at the top, maybe the bone that protrudes at the top of your spine. Others say, no, it's the other way. It's actually at the bottom, at the base of your spine. Some people say it might be the sacrum. And the word sacrum actually shares a root with sacred. Because actually in ancient times and even in other religions, this was a bone that was seen as somehow holy and divine and connects you to higher powers. But the problem with the sacrum is that it's not in the shape of a nut. But beneath the sacrum is your final bone, your tailbone, the coccyx, and that is in the shape of a nut, like an almond or a pine nut. I mean, it's the same shape. A pine nut's just a little almond, right? So it's in that same shape, and that's at the very base of your spine. So some people say that's the luz bone, okay, the bone of resurrection. Now, is there anything biologically, scientifically unique about that bone? Doesn't look like it. It seems to be a bone just like any other. There's this idea that luz doesn't decompose, that it's somehow unique and that it doesn't lose its structure. But the coccyx, the sacrum, there's no bone in the vertebrae that we know of that doesn't decompose. Like they all decompose. Like a skeleton will decompose left on its own. On average, in about 20 years, it'll be completely dust. And we don't see that a particular bone doesn't decompose. If that was the case, you'd see these bones all over the place, right? Because they would have amassed over the years, and there would just be, you'd be finding loose bones all around you. So we don't know of any bone specifically that doesn't decompose. So we have to explore, what does that really mean? What is an etzem? Right? What does the word etzem actually mean? What is an etzem? It's an essence, right? It's something about your essence, something about your bones that contains your essence. And if you think about what's in your bones, bone marrow, and what is the marrow? What is the purpose of the marrow? The marrow is the source of your blood cells, not just red blood cells, also white blood cells. The bone marrow has stem cells in it. And what is special about stem cells is that they are undifferentiated. They could be anything. The DNA, what makes you physically, is your DNA. You have 46 chromosomes, about roughly 22,000 genes. And every cell of your body except your gametes, except your reproductive cells, which is just one type for men and one type for women, except for that, all other cells in your body have the exact same DNA, same 46 chromosomes, same 22,000 genes. So what makes your eyes different from your toes? What makes skin different from liver cell? Like, they're all different. You have many different types of cells. And yet, any cell that you take, the DNA is the same. That's why we can use that in forensics or paternity testing, where you can have any sample from, it could be a blood, it could be a hair, and you can figure out a person's other traits. Right? At a crime scene, you can just take some tissue sample, and you can sequence the entire genome from that and figure out what the person looks like, what eye color he has. How is that possible? Because every cell of your body has the exact same DNA, and yet the cells are different. It's one of the big mysteries in science. We don't know. We still don't know how cells differentiate. It's something really spiritual. Right? I used to have a professor who would say it's something mystical, it's something spiritual. Like, he would admit those words. Right? I told this story before, but I had one professor who I would sometimes talk to about this stuff. And as he's talking, he's describing such divine things. This is a biology professor, okay? In a secular university, a secular professor. And he would say these things like that we have no clue how this works. It's like there's some kind of invisible force. And then I'd look at him and he'd be like, yeah, but I'm still an atheist, right? Like, he'd give me the look, and he'd laugh, and he's like, but I'm still, he'd say, he would argue that there's something called the submicroscopic matrix, something that we can't see. It's submicroscopic. We can't see it, but somehow it runs the whole show inside the cell. I'm like, wait, you're telling me that there's an invisible force that runs the whole cell and keeps you alive? And he'd say, yeah, but I'm still an atheist. I'm like, okay, if it makes you feel better, okay. So atheism really is an emotional decision. It's not a rational, logical decision. It either comes out of ignorance or out of deliberate emotional suppression. Right? Isaac Newton, I think, said it really well. A lot of people don't know this about Isaac Newton, that he was voted the greatest scientist of all time by the Royal Society, revolutionized our understanding of science. But Isaac Newton wrote more. We have all his journals. You can even look them up. I think they've been scanned even. Isaac Newton wrote a ton, and he revolutionized so much of what we know about optics and gravity and laws of motion and all these things. And math, he co-invented calculus. You have to understand the mind of this person, that Isaac Newton, one summer when there was a plague in England and all the professors left the university and went to the countryside to get away from the pandemic, Isaac Newton said, nah, I'll stay here, I'll do some work. He invented calculus over that time. This is what... He's one of the co-inventors of calculus. This is a genius mind, voted the greatest scientist of all time. Why am I talking about Isaac Newton? Because he's left a lot of writings. But more than half of his writings, the majority of his writings, were not even about science. It was about Torah. And I mean Torah. I mean most of it's about commentaries on Sefer Bereshit and Sefer Daniel. Those are just two main things. We forget that. We hear all about the science of Isaac Newton and the apple and the thing. Whatever, He was thinking more about the apple in the Gan Eden, right? Not that it was an apple, but he was thinking more about the fruit in the Garden of Eden than he was about the fruit with the gravity. So we forget that because we're presented a certain picture of Isaac Newton that isn't Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was a very actually deeply spiritual person. So he was not Jewish. He was born into a Christian family, but he rejected Christianity. He rejected JC as a god or anything like that. So again, he was very rational, very spiritual, but very rational. And some say there might have been a Jewish connection. His ancestry is a little obscure. But yeah, incredible mind. And so one of my favorite quotes is his quote. All of that was just to share this quote with you. It was a setup for this quote. Okay. So Isaac Newton said that, because at that time already atheism was growing, right? This Enlightenment times, early 1700s. And Isaac Newton said that, these are his words, that there's nothing more senseless and odious than atheism. Those were the words he used, senseless and odious. And he said if there was no other evidence at all, he said the human thumb would convince me of God's existence. That's what he said. I said, if I had nothing else to go on but just my thumb, I know that Hashem is there. Right? So it's an important thing to say. Now, how do we get here? We're talking about DNA. So your DNA in every cell is the same, but how do your cells know to differentiate? It's a mystical thing. We really don't know. But they do. Now, the only cells that are undifferentiated are stem cells, which is why they can become anything. Stem cells can become white blood cells, red blood cells, bone, whatever. They can be anything. So we can use stem cells and stem cell treatment, stem cell therapy. Potentially, again, could revolutionize medicine if we figure out how to properly use. And it's already been done successfully to treat all kinds of things, stem cells. Amazing. What the future holds with stem cells is unbelievable. So stem cells are undifferentiated. They have your true essence, your actual undifferentiated DNA. Without DNA coils, and you can turn off genes by coiling them shut. What I did research in back in the day was actually in DNA coiling, in epigenetics, in the coiling and uncoiling of DNA. Fascinating thing, and how it happens with various enzymes and proteins. So stem cells are undifferentiated, uncoiled. That is your pure essence. That is your etzem. And it happens to be that in your body, you have it mainly in your bones. The best stem cells are fetal stem cells, which of course we cannot use because they are taken by, God forbid, like various practices that we don't support. So, but you have stem cells in your bone marrow, and those are also stem cells. That's your undifferentiated essence. That's your etzem. Really, within your bones, your etzemot is your etzem. And if you think back to creation, again, to Adam and Eve, how did God create Eve? How did he make Chava? It reads like a surgery. God put a sleep on Adam. He did some anesthesia. Literally, that's what it says, right? He couldn't do it without the anesthetic? No, he put Adam to sleep. And it says he took from his tzela, which is, we believe, a rib bone. Although there are other opinions. But rib bone makes sense, and I'll tell you why. Because the ribs are very easy to access. Right? Like, we used to take stem cells from the femur. But there's a lot of meat there, and a lot of nerves. And it's very painful to take a huge needle through all that muscle and nerves into the bone and to extract. There's a lot of marrow there, so it's a good source, because that's like one of the biggest bones in your body, right? Femur, maybe the biggest bone in your body. But it's very painful, and there's a lot to recover. A bit much easier is to take some stem cells from your ribs, because there's nothing here. There's like not much. Just a little bit of skin, right? A little bit of meat. You make a little hole. You take the stem cells out of the ribs. It's the easiest place to extract stem cells. So Hashem put Adam to sleep. Got from his rib some stem cells, right? Some etzem, his essence. Right? You can take this metaphorically, yeah? So, but the idea, just understand the core idea, that he took the etzem and he created Eve. And then what does Adam say? He says, oh, hapam, this time she is etzem ma me'atzamai, right? She is my essence of my essence. What did he mean? Bone of my bone? No, something much deeper. Right? She was taken from my DNA. We have the same DNA. Right? We are compatible on a genetic level. With all the other animals, Adam was not compatible genetically. But this is we have the same number of chromosomes, we have the same genes. Now this is me. This is etzem yatzamai, essence of my essence. So that's your DNA. And to connect it back to what we were saying with the 4 and the 5. What is the genetic code? How many letters does your DNA have? Right, you have 4 bases in your DNA, right? Adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, ATCG. I think back to high school. So you have 4 bases. Your genetic code, also 4. Also parallels all these other 4s that we were talking about. But then you're going to say, oh, but what about the 5th? Shouldn't there be a 5th? And there is a 5th. Because there is a 5th nitrogen base in your body, without which your genetic machinery doesn't work. There is a 5th base, an RNA base, called uracil. Okay, so you have A, T, C, and G in your DNA, but that DNA cannot be expressed. It cannot be transcribed and translated into protein to make you who you are without RNA. And RNA has a 5th base, uracil. Right? In RNA uses uracil instead of thymine. You have the U instead of the T. So there actually are 5 nitrogen bases. There's the 5th one that makes the other 4 possible to express into who you are. Same patterns again, the 4 and the 5. You see it all over. You see it in Torah. You see it in the cosmos. You see it in the very foundations of the cosmos. Because how many forces do we have in nature that hold the whole cosmos together? Scientists tell us there are 4 fundamental forces. Gravity, and then electromagnetism, and then the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force. 2 nuclear forces that hold the atom together, and then electromagnetism and gravity, 4. And you can parallel them to Hashem's name. The way I sometimes teach it to my students to have them remember it, this is cute, but I think it works. Okay, how do you remember this? The Yud is up in the air. The Yud looks like it's about to fall. That's gravity. The Yud is gravity. And what is the gravitational constant on Earth? It's 10 meters per second squared. And Yud is 10. The gematria of Yud is 10. That's gravity. That's 10 meters per second squared. The Vav is like a ray. So that's electromagnetism. That's light rays. That's electromagnetic spectrum. That's rays. That's the Vav. And then you have 2 Heys. Hey. That's the 2 nuclear forces, right? And it almost looks like a cutaway of the nucleus of the top, right? You can think of it as like a little quarter of an atom diagram. That's how I remember it. And you like it, you don't like it, I don't know. But that's how I remember it. Yud is the gravity, Hey, right? You have 2 Heys, 2 nuclear forces, and Vav is the electromagnetic spectrum. But then again, what's the 5th? Scientists have been looking for the 5th thing, the uniting force that's behind all of these, that can explain all of these. And they call it the Grand Unified Theory, the GUT, which almost sounds like God, but it's the GUT. Scientists have been looking for that one thing that can explain it all, and perhaps that's string theory. Right? A lot of scientists say the Grand Unified Theory is string theory. That can explain all other forces. So again, you have a 5th thing. Scientists have 4, and say, well, we're looking for, we know there has to be a 5th that makes all of these other 4 possible. What is the 5th? So again, you have this 4-5 pattern. It's everywhere. It's everywhere you look. Once you see these patterns, you can't miss it. So that's Luz. Back to that. And that's, Luz is going to be your 5th city. It's your Yerushalayim Shel Mala. It's the place where the Malach HaMavet has no influence. And so, of course, it makes sense that this Luz bone is the bone of Tchiyat HaMetim, because the Malach HaMavet has no power over it. And is it a bone? Maybe it's DNA. Maybe Etzem is not just bone. It's what's in your bone. It's your inner essence, from which, scientifically, it's conceivable that you could resurrect people from their DNA. We're already doing things like that. Organ printing. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan suggested a long time ago. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan saw the resurrection of the dead as perhaps using DNA. We'll get to the point where we'll be able to. We have already cloned animals and things like using DNA. Can DNA technology get to the point where you can resurrect people? It's possible. It's definitely conceivable. It's within the realm of possible. So Rabbi Kaplan suggested it. Others have as well. Maybe it has something to do with our DNA. That's our Luz. That's our Luz bone, our inner essence, and that corresponds to the 5th, the ether, the spiritual, the highest level, the Adam Kadmon, the primordial man who's described as being an Olam Katan. Right? The original, every person is a microcosm of the universe. And that's why we can manifest our reality, because we're intertwined with the universe. We're all still part of that initial expanding light. Remember, we're all part of that white light, the Sefet, right? That initial glowing light that's still reverberating through the universe. And we're seeing things through various prisms that bend light and make us seem like things are different, but it's not. It's all the same energy, and we have all that power. You are a microcosm. Every one of us has the Adam Kadmon within. That's an Olam Katan. That's a microcosm of the universe. So if we have that in mind, I mean, there's no end to what we're capable of. You become this eternal, a being of infinite potential, because if you're tapping into God, if your Yechidah is connected directly to Hashem, and Hashem is infinite, you're tapping into infinite energy. So you have infinite potential, right? And we can accomplish anything. And if we do it together, for sure we're going to accomplish it. So we'll end with this. God willing, we'll accomplish all of this, and we'll see what we want to see soon. We'll see the Geulah B'ezrat Hashem very soon. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. How's my time? Where are we?
Excellent. We have time for 2 questions. Anybody has a burning question?
It's not burning, but
Go ahead.
so in the beginning you mentioned the world is still, I don't know what word you like, still vibrating, still.
The cosmos is still resonating with cosmic microwave background radiation.
But isn't Hashem constantly creating? It's
Right,
not like
yeah.
it's from the original creation, it's constantly.
And I think it's the same. I mean, I think those two things are really saying the same thing. That God is keeping this universe going every second. That energy is still reverberating throughout. Because remember, what is a wave? It's still bouncing back and forth, but who's the source of that energy? It still goes back to Hashem. So I think it's really saying the same thing. That it's not just that it was radiated, stopped, and that's it. No. It's still radiating.
It's not still, it never stops.
It never stopped. And God is constantly recreating. It's like it never ends, right? That we're still vibrating from the very beginning.
One more question?
Why did God create the world?
Im yada'ativ ha'itiv. Right. Why did God create the world?
Why did He create us?
For us to have this conversation.
No room for a man to be alone.
It's true.
So,
Maybe. Maybe, that's right. It's all about connection. Hazaku baruch.
תודה רבה.
My pleasure.
It's very nice you mentioned Yachatz, the initials.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody knows that, but it's true. Yerushalayim, Hebron, Tzfat, already in 1640.
Yeah.
But the first person who brings together the four cities is the Alshech.
Wow.
In 1590,
Wow.
he writes in his Hassidut Kasha, he writes, Ki beglal Tzfat. Okay, he says, it's Tzfat, the most important one. Beglal Tzfat, tibane v'tikonen, kiyum kol Eretz Yisrael, ve'im ein Tzfat, if there's no Tzfat, ein Tveria, ein Yerushalayim, ein Hebron, ve'ein ir be'eretz Yisrael le'itiyeh. So he was from Tzfat.
Amazing. Beautiful.
So he mentioned all these four, and that Tzfat is the source of the others. That's Alshech, 1590.
Beautiful. Hazaku baruch.
I think that's the original source.
Yeah, looks
And
like
Yachatz, true, the first time, 1640. Correct.
amazing. Beautiful. Thank you very much, everybody. Pleasure.
Thank you very much. I said, well, I want to say wow. And I can say now, you're a small secret,
Yeah.
because my wife is always complaining that I always wear blue. So now maybe it comes from somewhere where I don't
There you go. It's the
And we have something especially
Thank you so much.
from
That
Tzfat.
I really appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Thank
You very much for coming all the way
been
to
an
here. And it was very inspiring and
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody.
thank you.
Thank you so much. For this, I gotta turn off my
Right, and that's why
yeah. Why am I not here? I want to be. No, I was born in Mexico. Yeah, US, but I lived here for almost 7 years. My parents left for various reasons.
So we have to.
It's hard to come back.
like an
I should have
just
done it
cancel.
when I got
But
married.
it's getting out of control by the time.
So it wasn't like